Last year alone, more than 13,000 people went missing in New York City. And while most of these people do end up being found, hundreds of them go missing long term. Today's story reflects back on one of the most famous disappearance cases to ever hit New York City. It dates back to 1910 and to this day remains unsolved. So, let's get into it. Francis Arnold was a fine goods importer best known for his colognes and perfumes. He was a Harvard graduate with his own company. He's living this nice high-end life with his family. They live at 108 East 79th Street, which is just off of Park Avenue. He and his wife Mary had 4 children between 1884 and 1891, 2 boys and 2 girls, and his sister was married to an associate justice to the Supreme Court. Due to their social status, the family was listed in the Social Register, which was this book that basically told you which American families were richer than everybody else. Arnold's first daughter, Dorothy, studied literature and language at Bryn Mawr College in Pennsylvania. And when she graduated in 1905, she moved back home with aspirations to become a writer. Dorothy really enjoyed reading short stories in McClure's magazine and decided that she would work on her craft long enough until she thought her stuff was good enough to be featured there. The first time she submitted anything to them was in spring of 1910, but they rejected her. Dorothy goes and tells her family about it, and of course, rather than be supportive, they tease her. So Dorothy says, you know what? I'm going to go rent a post office box, and it's just going to be for me, and if I get any more rejection letters, no one needs to know about it. In November 1910, so a few months later, she would try to submit a new short story to McClure's magazine, but that was rejected as well. And this devastated Dorothy. She started to really second-guess her career choices. Maybe I'm never going to be a writer. From here, Dorothy went to her father and suggested, you guys aren't that supportive here. I don't think I'm doing my best writing here in this house. I want to take an apartment in Greenwich Village so that I can write there. Francis, very against this idea. He says, you don't need a new apartment. You have everything that you need right here. A good writer can write anywhere. So Dorothy sucked it up and continued to write out of the family home, never having any success. The following month, the family was preparing for Dorothy's younger sister's debutante party. A debutante party is this big lavish event that rich people like to throw for their wealthy young daughters to present them to society, to let everyone know that they are old enough to be married now. Oh my God. On December 12th, the 25-year-old Dorothy would go to her mom and say, hey, I'm going to go look for a dress for this party. And her mom said, oh, I'll go with you. But Dorothy said, no, I'll do this by myself. But if I see anything that I like, I'll give you a call. So she left the family home at 11 a.m. by herself, and it is the last time that anyone in her family saw her. However, other people would see her before she disappeared. About an hour after she left the home, she bought a box of chocolates from a store right near the Plaza Hotel area, 5th Avenue and 59th Street. The next place she went was a bookstore down by Madison Square Park, an additional 30 blocks south of her house. So she's about 3 miles away from her house at this point. There, she would purchase a book of humorous essays written by some female author that she liked. When she exited the store, she actually ran into a friend of hers named Gladys King. So Gladys and Dorothy chat about this debutante party, and eventually Gladys excuses herself because she's supposed to be meeting her mom for lunch at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel. Dorothy says, I'm going to go home at this point. I'm going to travel through Central Park to get there. And then they parted ways. They said their goodbyes. This is the last time anyone saw Dorothy. It occurred shortly before 2 p.m. When dinner time came and Dorothy didn't show up, the family was worried because she never missed a meal without informing them. But the way that they handled this disappearance, it almost seemed like they cared more about their reputation than finding their daughter. And here's what I mean. So the first thing they did, they called everybody they know. Hey, is Dorothy there? Have you seen her? And it would always end the same exact way. Don't tell anybody she's missing. In fact, one family ended up following up, calling hours later asking, hey, did she ever show up? And the Arnolds said, yeah, she showed up. She's in bed with a headache. She can't answer the phone, but she's here. The Arnolds aren't interested in any publicity. So rather than go to the police, Dorothy's older brother John had a lawyer friend who took on their case as a private detective. But the only clue he really found was some sort of unrecognizable papers that had been burned in her room. The family's claim was she must have burned her latest manuscript. The young lawyer couldn't really come up with any other answers, so he suggested either go to another detective agency or go to the cops. So they went with another detective agency. But those people couldn't come up with anything else either. So then they finally went to the cops. 6 weeks after their daughter had disappeared. This is a message directly to my family. If I go missing for 6 weeks and you do nothing, I'll haunt you. So the police told Francis, look, I think it would be a good idea if you made a statement. So he made one. He offered a $1,000 reward for anyone who had any useful information as to where his daughter was. The problem was this case had gone national, so there were tips coming from everywhere about any mysterious body that showed up anywhere in the country. Did they look into all of them? Yeah. Were any of them helpful? No, not really. When a sketch was released about what she looked like when she disappeared, Dorothy had been dressed to the nines, so it looked more like a fashion advertisement in the paper than it did a sketch for a missing person. When she disappeared, Dorothy had her dark brown hair in a full pompadour, and it was covered with a large black hat. She also wore a navy blue suit, high-neck white ruffle piece, black fox fur, and tan elbow-high gloves. When she left the house at 11 a.m., she also had a decent amount of money on her, anywhere between $25 to $30. That might not seem like a lot right now, but the value of that would be anywhere between $800 to $950 today. Now, there were definitive bank records that said she went to these 2 stores, that she had bought this chocolate, that she had bought this book, but when investigators went to interview the stores, they basically learned nothing. They learned that Dorothy was in high spirits, and that's basically it. They also questioned the friend Gladys, who said the same exact thing. She seemed like she was in high spirits. That's basically all the information she had. So, what are the working theories here? Her boyfriend thought it was possible that she committed suicide. Here's what's interesting. This is a secret boyfriend. Most women of Dorothy's stature were married by the time they were 21. She was 25, and her boyfriend was 42. And by society standards, not a great 42. The boyfriend's name? George Griscom Jr. He still lived at home, he followed his parents around for the most part, and Dorothy's family really didn't approve of him. According to them, he also didn't have much going for him in the looks or personality department, which I know, we're a rare breed. George believed that she was saddened by a failed writing career and took her own life. When the second short story came back and wasn't accepted into the magazine, she wrote to George and said, "All I see is a long road with no turning. Mother will always think that an accident happened." But if she did in fact kill herself, you're telling me no one has been able to find her body over the last 113 years? Now, as for George, he was in Italy at the time of the disappearance, so he didn't become a suspect. However, I do think it's interesting to note that all of the letters that they had ever sent to one another, he had destroyed because they were not of importance. Another theory was that she had slipped on some ice, and she got a concussion, and had a case of amnesia, and was in a hospital somewhere and didn't know who she was. But they checked all the area hospitals, and no one matched her description, so they tossed that theory out the window. Another theory was that she was pregnant and was seeking an abortion, and after a botched procedure, she died and was either buried or cremated to cover their tracks, but the father said, no, that's impossible. There were more reports of extortion, of kidnapping, nothing ever really came full circle, or made any sense. The odds of being kidnapped in the middle of Manhattan, being a wealthy girl and having no one notice that it was happening, pretty unlikely. Then there was a riverfront merchant who claimed that some young wealthy girl offered him jewelry in exchange for men's clothing so she could disguise herself. This would imply she wasn't missing, she just didn't want to be found. Something that distracts me about this story, and it's probably nothing, has to do with her last interaction with Gladys. So first off, Dorothy tells Gladys that she's going to go home by traveling through Central Park. This doesn't make any sense unless she's trying to go out of the way, because she can simply walk straight up Fifth Avenue without having to go into Central Park to get home, and make a right on East 79th Street. If she did travel straight up Fifth Avenue, then she could have traveled with Gladys to the Waldorf Astoria Hotel where she was planning on having lunch with her mother. The Waldorf Astoria Hotel was located at 5th Avenue and 34th Street, where the Empire State Building is currently standing. So this is where her last known whereabouts should have been, in my opinion. Of course, it's also possible Dorothy wasn't going straight home. didn't have to travel that way right away, and these details are irrelevant. But I thought it was interesting. It's also interesting that she told her mom, hey, I'm going to go buy a dress, and then went nowhere near any clothing stores. Now, this could very easily be an example of a daughter lying to her mother about where she's going, but once again, it's something that doesn't add up. In 1921, so 11 years after Dorothy had disappeared, a captain at the Bureau of Missing Persons said that Dorothy Arnold's fate was known to the Bureau and the family for quite some time, but he couldn't elaborate. The next day, he claimed to be misquoted. Her father died not too long after that and made no updates to his will to include Dorothy in it. He was convinced that Dorothy was dead. What's wild about this story is the number of theories that I've shared with you, any of these rumors, any of them could be true. There's so little evidence to refute anything that was presented to the family at any point throughout the investigation. The only thing we really know for certain is a 25-year-old heiress named Dorothy Arnold disappeared on a cold December day in 1910. So that's going to do it. It's a fascinating story. I encourage you to do your own sleuthing if you feel so inclined. And hey, feel free to share your own theories in the comment section below. Make sure to like, subscribe if you haven't, and until next time, deuces kids.